After 9/11 and after some other incidents occurred within this country, I had a very negative opinion about Islam.
SubhanAllah.
I was raised as a Christian, but I never really practiced the Christian faith. I considered myself to be an atheist. I felt very negative towards Islam. I wanted to equip myself with evidence against Islam. I remember that I was reading in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah in the Dutch translation, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was speaking about the hypocrites. And in Surah Al-Baqarah, the hypocrite is the person who says, I'm a Muslim, but in his heart, he knows he is not. And I already had a lot of conversations with people. And when I was speaking about Islam, they're saying, well, but are you a Muslim? And I said, no. And then I was reading this about the hypocrites. And I thought, you know what? I'm a hypocrite as well. Because when people ask me if I'm a Muslim, I say I'm not. But deep in my heart, I know that I am. Well, sometimes you hear people talking about the way that they came to Islam, and they will tell you that maybe they were searching for a light, or they were missing something, or they're really searching for something. I wasn't. After 9/11 and after some other incidents occurred within this country, I had a very negative opinion about Islam.
SubhanAllah.
I was raised as a Christian, but I never really practiced the Christian faith. So although I was raised as it, I considered myself to be an atheist. And when we found that there was more and more discussion about the influence of Islam on the culture of the Netherlands or the society of the Netherlands, and people were starting to debate this, I felt very negative towards Islam. I felt that, we just more or less got rid of Christianity in this country. Another religion comes around, and these guys have a book of their own. I was not an activist like some people. I wasn't on the streets with signs. I wasn't politically active in this field, but my personal opinion were very negative. But I found that whenever I was speaking to people about Islam and I was voicing all my negativity, I did not have a lot of references to really back up my claims. So my motivation was to read books about religion in general and in Islam specifically. So it would help me to detail my arguments against Islam. I wanted to equip myself with evidence against Islam. And during the course of 4.5 years, and it's not like I was reading every day for 4.5 years, but from the moment it started till the moment I finally took my Shahada, I found that all the arguments that I had against Islam, that I tried to back up with evidence, I needed to scratch them off my list. And at some point, there were no arguments left. And while I was doing so, more and more arguments in favor of Islam came to the table. At first I read more or less academic books from non-Muslims describing Islam and religion in general. It really took a long time for me to start reading books that were written by Muslims themselves. I remember one of the first Quran translations that I was reading in Dutch was also a translation made by a man who wasn't a Muslim himself. It really took a long time for me, but then by the time I started to take it seriously and I started to notice a shift in my own thinking and in my approach to Islam, I think it was more or less that moment that I really started to read about the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. And then things really started to get into motion. And I even fasted during the month of Ramadan before I was a Muslim, because I figured that, you can read about Ramadan, but it's like reading about an apple pie. You don't know apple pie until you tasted it. So you can read about it, but you got to taste it. So I did the month of Ramadan, which is funny because in the Dutch media, they always say Muslims are fasting from sunrise to sunset. So I had Islamic colleagues and they were complaining, oh, we need to wake up this so early. And I said, oh, it's so easy. I don't know why you are complaining. You're Muslims. I'm not even a Muslim. I think it's easy. But then later on, I figured that it's not from sunrise, but it's from Fajr. So these guys were all waking up like 2 hours earlier. And I was being like a tough guy, like, why are you complaining? I was wrong. But when you get into when you're from the outside and you're slowly working your way inside and you have no idea and you're just trying to grab hold of the details. But it wasn't until the moment that I really started to consider that Islam was probably the truth, and that Muhammad ﷺ was probably rightfully so referred to as a prophet. And then a lot of social questions came into play because I'm a white male on the northern hemisphere. I had a job. I was doing fine, and it's very easy to be a white male atheist in this society. It's like everything is. It's like the sun is shining every day, right? From a society perspective, and there's a lot of pressure on the Islamic community. So I was like, man, am I going to join the people who are under pressure while I'm in a position of privilege? Then at one moment, I remembered that I was reading in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah in the Dutch translation, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was speaking about the hypocrites. And in Surah Al-Baqarah, the hypocrite is the person who says, I'm a Muslim, but in his heart, he knows he is not. And I already had a lot of conversations with people. And when I was speaking about Islam, they're saying, well, but are you a Muslim? And I said, no. And then I was reading this about the hypocrites, and I thought, you know what? I'm a hypocrite as well. Because when people ask me if I'm a Muslim, I say I'm not, but deep in my heart, I know that I am. It's the opposite, but it's still a form of hypocrisy. So then I realized, no, man, whatever is going to come of this, and however I will be greeted by people or no longer greeted by people or whatever, you have to face the facts always.
No,
So then I went and finally took the step to take the Shahada. I grew up in a household where we very frequently have very open conversations, not debates, but we're really challenging each other's views and explaining what you're thinking of topics. So I was used to being in an environment where we would speak and discuss and exchange arguments. And then, of course, people around me started to noticing that the arguments that I was using and the positions that I was taking are starting to shift. This is why they were asking me, not in my household, but around me, like, are you a Muslim? Because people were starting to notice the shift in my previous statements and my latter statements. And so people started to notice. Yeah. And I think that the moment that I finally became a Muslim and when I told my parents that I was going to become a Muslim, it wasn't a big shock. They knew it was coming. They could see the trajectory and they could see changes being made in my life. So I'm not going to go into the details, but let's just say that there are obviously some things that you are very common to do as an atheist in this society that as a Muslim we would consider to be haram.
Yeah.
So when I was starting to back away from those things and trying to start living a life within the boundaries of what is allowed, even before I took the Shahada, yeah, obviously people were starting to notice. My mother is a Christian and my father is an atheist and my sister is also a Christian. Yeah. So I was raised in a multi-religious household. My mother was very happy about it because she tried to raise me as a Christian and then I became an atheist. So then when I converted to Islam, she was happy because I believed in God again. And she understands that when we refer to Allah, we are referring to the God who sent all the prophets. For her, it was like, okay, so he's taking a different path than I took, but he is still coming back to worship God. Although we have obviously some different theological views when it comes to the details, overall she was happy that I became a person who believed in God again. And also, you know, your parents, they want to see you happy. Even if it is something that they totally disagree with, if it makes you happy, then they're happy. And for me, when I started to live a life in accordance with Sharia, they saw that I needed to fix things in my life that they were worrying about. You know, why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? And now I became a Muslim. She said, you're no longer allowed to do this? I said, no. That's a good religion. The position of the parents, and specifically the mother in Islam, it is so well documented and you cannot, I don't think you can really learn about Islam and miss the fact that we have so much respect for the parents and specifically the mother in Islam. So after I became a Muslim, of course also because I became older, but also because I became a Muslim, the relationship with my parents in fact became much stronger, much deeper, and much more with much more affection. So I think that that the relationship that I have with my parents since I've become a Muslim now is much better than what I had before. And there's a funny story there as well. My mother has a friend, and the friend has trouble with her son. And my mother, who is not a Muslim, said to her friend, "Well, you better hope he becomes a Muslim, because when your son becomes a Muslim, he will love you as much as he can. It's like my mother is doing dawah to Islam. And I'm really happy because you have the theory, but my parents don't care about the theory. They look at my life. So when I hear them saying stuff like this, it means that, because I'm trying to, as every Muslim, I'm trying to, within the limits of my lack of capabilities or lack of understanding or whatever, I'm trying to implement Islam in my deeds, not only in my opinion, but in my actual deeds. So then when people are looking at your deeds and they are considering this to be good and good because of Islam, I think that that's a very good thing. The easiest way to tell the story is like the sad story, and then everybody left, etc. I think that I did lose friends. I did. But they also lost me, because the things that we used to do, I no longer did. So they chose to continue on the trajectory that they were on, and I chose a different path. And I think it's part of life that you meet people and then you join, and then at some point, with some of the people you depart. What I did not expect when I became a Muslim, because I did not have a very clear understanding of the way that the Islamic community would view me as a convert. I figured it would be like I'm like a class B Muslim, right? And that's what I expected. How wrong was I? I figured all these people have been Muslim all their lives, so I'm gonna go to the mosque and they'll look at me like. And some of the guys in the mosque knew who I was before I became a Muslim, so I was like, man, they're gonna see me coming. I'd go like, that's the guy that did this and that, right? So I wasn't very bad, but I wasn't good either, right? So. But there was, of course, huge acceptance, and I have a lot of Muslims in my friend group now. But the interesting thing is that I also found that some of the people that I knew that were non-Muslim before my Shahada have now become much better friends. Because now when we have discussions, we really discuss our values, our core values. And although they are still non-Muslim, my friendship with some of these people really went to a much higher level. So I think that you lose people, the people lose you, and then you gain new friends. Yeah. And overall, I mean, it's a major upgrade. There are multiple effects, and not all effects are negative. Now, when I'm going to refer to positive effects, keep in mind the source is negative. The rise of the far right is negative. Anti-Islam rhetoric is negative. Politicians trying to enforce restrictions upon Muslims and Muslims only in a country where the constitution says that the government is not allowed to differentiate between religions, this is bad, right? So, but it has some positive effects and it has negative effects. So the negative effects is that obviously there is a very big push towards thinking negative about Islam. This narrative, this very negative narrative is being pushed by big forces. So this is something we need to deal with, and it hurts the security of Muslims, especially the women. When I walk in the street, people don't know, because I'm white, people don't immediately think that I'm a Muslim unless that I'm wearing Islamic clothing. But for the sisters, of course, with the hijab, this is there. It results in some security risks. On the other hand, everything that you give attention will grow. So two things happen. One, for the people who are not Muslim and who are constantly hearing negative things about Islam, just like in my life, because my story isn't unique, they will want to research it more because they want to understand the threat. Now, everybody who has an open heart and an open mind and starts to investigate Islam, I mean, we open the door for them and they can take Shahada of that. The second thing is that it pushes Muslims much further into the religion. And this is a very strange thing, because again, the cause is a negative thing, and I'm not going to say the cause is good, but the consequence, this specific consequence, is positive, because you have so many Muslims who were raised with Islam but never really questioned it, and as a result never really studied it. So they just more or less copy whatever they saw the people around them doing, but there's no intellectual, theological basis behind it. But because in their school system, people are saying, you are a Muslim, And in their work, people are saying, you are a Muslim and you think this, and the Quran teaches that. They want to research it. And then, because of this pushes them further into the religion. So we now see that because a lot of the Muslim community in this country came here through migration. And we now see that the second generation, or even the third generation of these people, are more religious than the people who initially came here. Why? Because the anti-Islamic sentiments is pushing them not out of Islam, but further into Islam. And it's also not only about being strict, it's about being passionate. This specific thing is not allowed, but I'm going to do it anyway. Then you can grow and say this specific thing is not allowed, so therefore I will not do it, although I want it. But then you get to a level, oh, this thing is not allowed because Allah thinks it is bad for me. And I put my trust in Allah, therefore I do not no longer want to do it. And that's a very important step. And we see that the younger generations, because now they are getting the more knowledge, which is funny because I teach Islam on a basic level, right? I'm on a basic level to converts. But half of my classroom are filled with people who are raised with Islam, born as Muslim. Yeah, and then everybody's born a Muslim, etc. But they were at least raised as Muslim. Let's say that. But then you see that the people who have been living a life as, and referring to themselves as Muslims for sometimes 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years, they come to the classes that we give to the converts, and they're learning stuff. And they're saying like, oh, my life, I had a difficulty with maybe this part of Islam. But it's not because it was incorrect, it's because my understanding was incorrect. So I think that's so again, the source, the push, the anti-Islamic sentiments in this country is negative. Some of the results of this are also negative. When people are burning a mosque, this is negative. When people are throwing stuff at the Muslim because she is wearing a hijab, this is negative. When people are not hired for a job, this is because they're Muslim, this is negative. When the government is saying that they're putting you in a higher risk potential system because your name is Muhammad, this is negative. So there's a lot of negativity there. But also, and we must never forget, it has some positive aspects as well. Converts are not intrinsically better Muslims, of course. They don't necessarily know more. They are not necessarily better in practicing Islam. So I consider a convert equal to another Muslim. They do have one very strategic benefit, and that is that they know what it's like not to know what it's like. When I'm talking to a non-Muslim, I can understand some of the misconceptions he has because I had them as well, or the concerns, or all these things. Or even in language, you will find that people who are non-Muslims will use the same words with a different meaning than Muslims. So when we as Muslims refer to Islam, we're talking about the religion of God. And we are, as Muslims, trying to adhere to this religion, which is already there before we were born. But when non-Muslims are talking about Islam, they are talking about the thing that you are actually practicing. So this is a difference in language, and it results in miscommunication. Because I'm a convert or a revert or whatever you prefer to use, I understand what it's like not to know what it's like. And this is a strategic benefit that converts have, which will allow them easily to build bridges and understanding and to open the doors for the people who are non-Muslims and looking in. First, I do not, by definition, think that divorce is wrong. I think that divorcing in a wrong way is bad. Because if we look at some of the lives of some of the companions of the prophets, they were divorced many times. We refer to that as the best generation ever, right? But it's the way in which you are divorcing. I think that sometimes people compliment converts. In this country, I don't know if that also happens in other countries, but in this country, some people compliment converts and say, wow, you took Islam without the culture. And I always disagree with this compliment. I say, no, I took Islam with my culture. This also means that there is a risk involved, because this society in general is pushing a couple of ideas. One of the ideas is that individualism is better than thinking as a collective. So you should think about yourself, and are you happy? right? Before thinking about other people. This is a very important ideology that is being pushed in this society. The second one is capitalism. So where we are saying that the attainment of material needs is a goal in itself. As a Muslim, I'm not against owning money or property, but I'm against materialism, which means that I'm wrongfully giving it a much higher value in my life. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a risk. Yeah, sure, enjoy it. Enjoy it. If you work and your work was halal and the money is halal, enjoy it, right? But the capitalism and the materialism should not be accepted as an ideology, right? And then the third one is we have a lot of postmodern thinking, where people are considering truth to be a relative term. What is true to you? What is true to me? And these three ideologies of individualism, of capitalism, and of postmodernism, they can become a part of the thinking of a Muslim without him knowing it. So a person is praying 5 times a day, he's fasting, he's reading Quran or she's reading Quran, etc., thinking, I'm really doing good. Because when you look at the orthopraxis, the actual deeds, we would say this is correct. They're accepting, they're doing what is mandatory and they're staying away from what is haram, right? But at the same time, we find that these ideologies can become a part of the thinking and a part of the worldview of these people. And sometimes we can even see that it influences, for instance, the way that they're reading the Quran. I hear somebody else says, okay, I have a different religion. And they say, this is good. This is nice. As a Muslim, I think it's very nice that you are a Christian. Because we say, lakum dinukum waliya din. For me is my religion and for you is your religion. And they are explaining this verse from the Quran as if it is saying that everything is good. And I'm trying to explain to them, no, this is not lakum dinukum waliya din. It is not stating that all these different religions have the inherent same quality. It's a red line where we're saying we're not going to cross into the religion of another person because our religion is al-haq, right? So also people say, la ikra fi din. Somebody says, do you think that I should become a Muslim? They say, no, la ikra fi din. And I tell them, listen, this is only the first sentence of the verse. Say the entire verse. There is no compulsion in the religion because the thing that is right can be easily recognized from the thing that is wrong. It is not saying that everything is identical. When I say the Shahada, that's not my opinion. It's not like, no, come to think of it, yeah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, right? No, it's not like an opinion that I have. It's not that this is not my perspective or my view. No, this is the truth. When you put me in front of a judge and you put me under oath, and I will have to testify. And if I lie, you're going to send me to jail for the rest of my life? I will say, Ashhadu la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this idea of postmodernism can be dangerous. And then of course, with capitalism, where we are wanting to strive for Jannah, not dunya. We're in dunya. We're not denying dunya, but we're striving for Jannah. So capitalism will want you to strive for dunya. Right? So we need to get rid. And then individualism, no, we are a collective. We are a collective. And so many times I hear Muslims say, but why are you talking about the way that I am practicing? This is my life. And I tell them, no, this is not your life. Because when you go into the office and you're not going to ask for a place to pray, because you're saying, don't bother. This is my life. This is how I chose to do it. I'll come home and I'll do my prayers late, right? I don't want to do that in the office. And they'll say, it's my life. I said, no, it's not your life. Because the Muslim that's coming after you, it will become much more difficult for that person. Because when that person says, I need to pray in time, and I've literally seen this so many times, when the Muslims in the office say, we want to pray on time, they say, why? All the other Muslims here say it's no problem. So I tell the other Muslims, this is not your life. Don't consider this from a perspective of individualism. We are a collective. You need to pray on time because it will help the person coming next to you. You need to stay away from the alcohol because it is going to, or when there is a meeting and there's alcohol and you say, well, I prefer not to attend. They say, why not? All the other Muslims are coming. Are you an extremist? So no, they should have also said the same thing, right? So we need to have in our ideology to reject the individualism and accept the collective thinking of the ummah as a whole. We should reject capitalism and remind ourselves that we are in dunya and you're allowed to enjoy yourself, you're allowed to have and attain property, become rich. I want every Muslim to become a multimillionaire because they have to pay zakat, right? Lots of it, right? This is good, but keep in mind, don't ever think this is more important than Jannah. Don't ever trade Jannah for dunya, right? And then the second thing is this postmodernism. No, Islam is the truth. It's not your opinion. It's not your feeling. This is the truth. Do I respect the freedom that other people have to disagree? Yes. Do I respect their traditions in a way that I will defend their freedom? I will. Well, if I hear that there will be an attack on a church, will I be there to defend it? I will. But if you're asking me, does this mean that our religions are equal? No, Islam is the religion of Allah, right? So we need to be very strict on these ideologies, and those ideologies they can become part of, or they can stay within the mind of a revert. And keep in mind, they can also be through influence from schools, from work, from media, from social media. They can become part of the thinking of the people who are raised with Islam as well. So we need to be very strict on the impact that those ideologies can have, because eventually these ideologies will become an obstacle between us and the satisfaction that Allah will have about our lives.